Welcome back, friends, to Build a Lot Acres. In today's episode, we're going to be playing a fun little game, Wheel of Tractor. Stay tuned.
One small town New England family living out their adventures, one day at a time, sharing for the whole world to see. This is Build a Lot Acres. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video.
Alright, so we made up this fun little game we're going to try playing. We have 8 different brands of garden tractors on our wheel here. We're going to have spin our arrow, and whatever one it falls on, we're going to talk about that brand a little bit. You ready to go, Brett?
Yeah.
You didn't sound too confident.
Nope. Oh.
Alright, let's do it again. Let me see it. Alright, here's the first spin. Yeah, I think you're right. It's always going to fall on that one. Because the bottom's too heavy. Alright, Brett, you want to give it this first spin?
Might as well. Oh.
Alright, Boelens. What can you tell us about Boelens?
Well, I'm not a master of Boelens knowledge, as you guys probably know. But I know that they had 2 main series. So they had the tube frame series and then the large frame series.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the large frame series had some of their most legendary models, including but not limited to like the HT20 and the HT23, which are brutes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure the HT23 was actually on our Super GTs video.
It was on our Super GTs video. And we also have a video on
Just Boelens.
large frame Boelens history.
Yes.
So if you want to check that out, go out to our playlist, go to Garden Tractors, and you'll find it. Ford and Jacobsen. What can you tell us?
Well, I know that Ford, with Jacobsen, they had a few different models. First, with Ford, there was 100, 120, you know. Then after that, they switched to the LGT, I believe it was the 125, 145, 165. And this was around the 80s when they had gone from the 100, 120 down to the LGTs. And I know that Ford and Jacobsen ended up splitting in, I believe, the late 80s, early 90s, around there. Correct?
So Jacobsen built many of Ford's garden tractors. I believe they started right around 1959, 1960, 61, somewhere in that range, right around 1960. It was actually a Danish immigrant, Nud Jacobsen, that started the company. And like I said, they built a lot of Ford's tractors. And that's pretty common back then, was a lot of the big tractor companies like Ford wanted a garden tractor, but they weren't really set up with the tools and dies and everything to make their own line. So often they would subcontract out to a small company that already made garden tractors that had a proven design like Jacobsen, and they just repainted them with Ford coloring and decals and labeled them Ford. But underneath that blue paint is actually a Jacobsen. So a lot of the Ford models are also confined in Jacobsen and vice versa.
Which the nice part about that is if you own a Ford, then a lot of the parts are interchangeable with Jacobsen parts. Granted, they might be orange instead of blue or vice versa, but they all work the exact same.
And if you want to see the biggest, baddest Ford garden tractor ever made, LGT 195, which is the Jacobsen 53500, that's actually in our biggest, baddest garden tractors video, so go check it out.
Yes, it is.
All right, Brett, your spin.
Oh.
That wasn't much of a spin.
There we go.
Simplicity Alice Chalmers. What can you tell us?
Well, this is one that I know a decent amount about. So I know that when they first started making garden tractors, it was all, like a lot of companies at the time, it was all little 5 to 10, maybe 12 horsepower garden tractors. And then, of course, as the horsepower war started happening, Simplicity tractors got bigger, more powerful, with tractors like the Landlord and Sovereign coming out, which offered bigger engines. And then in 1975, they came out with the Power Max. Maybe it was 76. I believe it was 1975. They came out with the Power Max. and that was the biggest garden tractor ever made. And then once they discontinued that, a couple years later, they came out with the Sunstar, which was another pretty big garden tractor, but nowhere near the size and sheer impressiveness of the Power Max.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously between that, they had a ton of models ranging from things like the Sovereign, the Landlord, the Broadmoor, the Yeoman. Then they had like the 3000 series, 4000 series, 5000 series, 6000 series, 7000 series, like Grampy has 37117s, for example. You know, so on and so forth. And then once they came out with the Legacy, which was early 2000s, they went back to the naming system of, they had the, I believe it's the Regent, the Broadmoor, the Landlord, the Prestige,
Conquest.
and the Conquest.
Yeah, they used to have some really cute names. They had the Baron, the Landlord, the Sovereign. I don't know where they came up with these ideas for the names, but it was pretty cool.
It was pretty
So I believe Simplicity is owned by Alice Chalmers, or was. I don't know.
Yeah, they were owned by Alice Chalmers, then they were bought out by Dutz Alts. That's why there's the Dutz Alts Ultimas.
I
Which
believe
are
they're built
basically-
down south, like in the Carolinas, right?
I believe so.
I think
yes.
the plant is located in one of the Carolinas, but if you know for sure, leave it in the comments. But let's do our next spin. Cub Cadet.
Oh,
So I know I'll start off with this one. So Cub Cadet, which was owned by International Harvester, they came out with the first Cub Cadet garden tractor. It was actually similar to Ford. It was right around 1960, 61 area, and that was a very, that time period where you're going to see a lot of brands came out. That's when they really started realizing the potential and the need for that size tractor for small landowners.
well,
And you saw the companies come out with these little garden tractors to
'cause
fill
what
that
you
niche.
gotta remember is this was early 60s they started coming out with these. Early to mid 50s is when these suburbs really boomed and took off.
Yeah, right
So
after
as-
World War II ended.
Yeah, so as all these people move into the suburbs, a lot of these companies were like, oh, on top of a lot of farmers needing these big industrial tractors, we have a lot of people now living in suburbs that don't need a big industrial farm tractor, but they still need something bigger than a little lawnmower to mow their lawn, tend for their garden, so on and so forth, and so that's where the garden tractor was really born.
And then, like I said, it was right around 1960, and I believe in about 81 is when International Harvester sold the Cub Cadet line to MTD, and they ended up keeping the Cub Cadet name on there, but they're not the same tractors. That's when they really went from like the red color scheme over to the white again. The red Cub Cadets were kind of the last of the Cub Cadets, like the 982, 782, those kind of tractors were the end of the International Harvester branded or owned Cub Cadets, and after that is when they went over to MTD owned.
And I believe the 982 was a pseudo Super GT, kind of like the Sunstar was, correct?
That was actually the model of GT that they coined the term Super Garden Tractor.
Really?
Was the Cub Cadet 982. All right, so next spin. Who just spun?
So,
Gravely. So Gravely has a long history. I believe it goes back to like 1850 or so. But they have a lot of cool tractors. One of the things that differentiated Gravely's from a lot of other brands was they had the engines in the back of the tractor, pretty much right behind the seat. So you had a lot of traction on the rear wheels because you had all that weight back there pushing down.
which was nice.
And they also, I would say, are probably they have the most legendary snowblowers of any of the guide tractor brands, the Gravely Snow Cannon. They first started out on the two-wheel walk-behind Gravely tractors, and then they also had them on the four-wheel sit-down garden tractors. But the Snow Cannons were shaft-driven two-stage snowblowers, and they just chucked the snow, 60, 70 feet in some cases, depending on the wetness and the type of snow you had. But
I've seen a few of them run, and if you've never seen one, they are something else.
They are pretty incredible. But yeah, Gravely had some cool models. We did discuss them in the biggest, baddest garden tractor video. We discussed the 24G and the GMT 9000, which are like two of the biggest Gravely garden tractors ever made. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly, highly recommend it.
Because I believe there's a tractor from actually every one of these brands on there, correct?
I think so.
Because there's a Bowman's, there's a Cub, there's a Gravely, is there a Wheel Horse?
On here?
Oh yeah, I know there was a D250. Never mind. There's the FF24.
You mean in the biggest, baddest garden tractor video?
Yes.
I believe so.
I know there's Simplicity. I know there's Ford Jacobson. I know there's Case Ingersoll. So there is.
But going back to Gravely, I believe it was around the early 80s, maybe like 80, 81, 82 is when Gravely got bought out by Ariens out of Brillion, Wisconsin, which I believe Ariens still owns the Gravely name. And they still make Gravely products like zero turn mowers, which I have a video on those as well. You know, the Ariens and the Gravely, you can get zero turns labeled either one, but they're both basically the same. Like for example, the Ariens Apex and the Gravely HD are basically the same zero turn, so they're still made to this day here in the USA.
Yeah. Another spin. Oh,
What can we possibly talk about with this brand?
I think we've talked about everything there is to
Well, I think we've gone over the history of Case Ingersoll quite a bit. So I'm not going to rehash all that. Started in the early 60s. Two brothers got bought out by Case and got bought out by Ingersoll. But you're actually seeing a Case right here, Case 448 High Wheeler. Like
This
I said,
yeah, technically an Ingersoll.
like I've said, they have three main series. They had the High Wheelers, the Low Pros, and High Loaders. But they also did have other tractors as well. Some people may not realize, but they did have lawn tractor series with smaller tires, and they also had even like zero turn type tractors as well.
Yeah, they had a lot of cool stuff.
But like I've said in other videos, the coolest thing I think about the Case Ingersolls is the High Wheeler series with the big tires, and the hydraulic drive that they had was very unique. Not very many brands of any tractor has hydraulic drive. Case is one of the only ones that I'm aware of.
And what I think is cool about that is then, as I believe you said in your video about what makes them unique, is that it allows for a lot of implements to be run that normally couldn't. Like you could run a wood chipper or a wood splitter directly on the back of this with no additional power needed.
Yeah, you get a lot of flow, 8 to 10 gallons of flow per minute for your hydraulic, and about 2,200 psi, so about double your typical hydrostatic system and double the pressure. All right, if it lands on something we've already done, we'll just spin it again. We already did Gravely. We already did Simplicity. Wheel Horse. So Wheel Horse is actually a father-son company. Elmer Pond and his son Cecil used to work for Elmer's brother Harold, who founded SpeedX. And they decided that there wasn't quite enough, meat on the bone for all three of them. So they ended up branching off, the father and son duo, and they started their own company. They originally called it Pond, and then ended up calling it Wheel Horse, which, obviously they're one of the most legendary garden tractor brands of all time.
Also one of the most recognizable. That I feel like if you say to anyone, John Deere, Cub Cadet, or Wheel Horse, they're going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
Even if they have no clue about garden tractors.
They're very revered garden tractors for good reason. They had a great system. They had some really cool designs built into the tractors. They had some good series. They had the number series, and they also had the letter series, like the B series, the C series, and then the big Ds, which we've covered in other videos.
D250.
But they did have some really nice tractors. I've never owned a Wheel Horse, but I've seen a number of them in person, and I know people that own them. And they do make a great tractor, there's no doubt about it. I think we have to admit, Wheel Horse is probably one of the coolest garden tractor names out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the logo itself of the horse
With the wheel.
is pretty damn cool, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, it is.
Alright, so what haven't we talked about?
The only one left is Sears and Craftsman, I believe.
Sears Craftsman.
Yes. Which I feel like Sears and Craftsman always get the short end of the stick when talked about, because they're always looked at as the budget brand. They're always looked at as lesser than other brands and cheaper quality than other brands, and I think it's an undeserved rap, personally.
So Sears really started off in like the 1950s with the David Bradley tractors. They had the walk behinds, and then they came out with the four-wheel tractors. And
The Suburbans, yeah.
like Brett said, because Sears was associated with a department store, I think a lot of people kind of thought they were cheaper than some of the other brands. But I'll tell you, I've owned at least 2 or 3 Sears and Craftsman now, and they made a rugged tractor. You still see the Sears Suburbans in use in a lot of different places, even though some of them are 50 years old plus at this point. My SS14 is from 1971, so that's 51 years old right now in 2022. And the Suburbans go back to the mid to late 60s, so another 5 to 8 years, let's say, before that. So, I mean, they really had a rugged tractor.
They did.
Because of the 6-speed transmission, a lot of people look for them for pulling tractors.
Yes, they do, and they do. They make great pulling tractors. I actually remember one time we had a pulling competition at my grandfather's, and Michael Ben had brought his Montgomery Ward. My father had his SS14. I had my 220, and my grandfather had his 7117.
Simplicity.
Yes, his Simplicity. And I remember my father got pretty far along in that, even though he was outweighed by both my tractor and my grandfather's, and outpowered by my grandfather's tractor by a decent margin too.
Yeah.
He got pretty far in that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work with the SS14 over the years.
Storm Nemo.
Be it Storm Nemo, which was a 31-inch snowstorm back in
2013.
Was it 13 or 14?
13.
2013, February of 2013. We had 31 inches here in my town, with my driveway being close to 1,000 feet long, and pulling firewood. It's just been a real workhorse around the years and around the yard.
I'd say out of all of the tractors my father has owned, hands down, we have the most impressive stories that no one will ever believe about the Sears. Because it's not like it is 20 horsepower and big top. It's not like it's the 448. It seems about half as capable as a 448, but it's done twice as much work.
I think I only paid like $250 for the Sears for my cousin.
For that.
So if you're watching,
thank you.
I did have to do quite a bit of work to it, though. You didn't leave it to me in good shape, I'm just saying. All right, so that's going to do it for today's Wheel of Tractor. If you guys want to see us do it again with some other brands, let us know in the comments, and we will see you guys
in the next one.